Okay, so we're continuing with this Metta in Motion retreat. And Venerable Yo Min had asked me to give a talk on the Metta Sutta. This is known as the Discourse on Loving Kindness. And it's probably the most popular sutta in the Theravada Buddhist canon. And so in a country like Sri Lanka, almost as soon as a child born into a Buddhist family learns to talk, they'll be taught the Metta Sutta. And so they grow up learning to recite this Metta Sutta, the Discourse on Loving Kindness. And it has a very, very beautiful euphonic character to it. And I was just searching for some good recording of a chanting of the Metta Sutta, and I found one on YouTube. You could look it up on your own. It's the Metta Sutta chanting by a Sri Lankan monk. I don't know him personally. His name is Bhante Indaratana. What I don't like is that it has a musical background to it. I like simple vocal chanting without a musical background, but his voice is very beautiful, and the sutta itself in the Pali, the sound is very beautiful. I could try chanting it in Pali if you want. My voice is not so good, but you'll be able to appreciate the melodic quality of the sutta. Shall I try it? Okay. And please excuse my voice, is a little bit like a croaking voice. Karaniyam matta kusalena yang tang santang padang abhisamecha sako jucha sujucha suvacho cha samudu anatimani Santu sakocha subarocha apakichocha salahukavuti Santindriyocha nipakocha apagabo kulesu annanukito nacha kudam samachare kinchi Yena vinyu pare upavadeyung Sukino va kemino hantu Sabbe sata bhavantu sukitata Ye ke chipana bhutati Tasava tavarava Anavasesa digavaye mahantava majimara sakanukatula ditavayeva adita ye chadure vasanti avidure Bhutava sambhave siva sabbe sata bhavantu sukhitata naparo parang nikubeta nati manyeta katachinam kanchi pyaro sanapatika sanya Nanyamanya sadukamicheya mataya taniyam ayusa ekaputang anurakke evam pisababhutesu manasang bhavaye aparimanang met Tantra sabalokasmin manasang bhavaye aparimanang udang adocha tiriyancha asambadang avedang asapatang Titang charang nisinova sayanuvayavatassavi gatamito etang sating aditeya brahmametang viharang idamahu diting cha anupagama silava dasanena sampanno kame su vinayagedang nahi jatu gabaseyang punareti ti. Okay, so that is the Metta Sutta in Pali. And so we'll be looking at the sutta line by line. But first, for almost all of the discourses of the Buddha, there's often a background story that explains how the Buddha came to deliver this discourse. And this is the background story that comes in the commentary to the Sutta Nipata, to the collection where we find the Metta Sutta. And you could believe it or not, but this is the story. Okay, there was a group of monks who came to the Buddha and they received some instructions in meditation, and they wanted to go off to a somewhat remote place, maybe in the Himalayan foothills, to do their meditation. And so they got their instructions from the Buddha. They came to this little forest grove near a village in the Himalayan foothills. It seemed like a very beautiful, serene place, nice hills, grass, trees, nearby a village where they can go on their alms round. And so they sat down, the villagers built little huts for them, and at night they would stay in the huts. During the day they would sit outside doing their meditation. But a little problem arose, and this is where I say you have to be willing to make a suspension of disbelief. So there were a kind of deities living in the trees where the monks went to meditate. And the deities were upset that the monks had come to meditate in that grove. They liked to be sort of enclosed upon themselves. They didn't like foreigners coming. It's a little bit like, I have to say, like people in America who don't like the immigrants coming from other countries. How are they coming into our country? We have to get rid of them, get the ICE agents to catch them and expel them. So in this case, when the monks came to live in this forest grove where the deities were living in the trees, the deities tried to drive the monks away. They would create horrific appearances and project them out in front of the monks when they were meditating. At night, they would make terrible screeching noises, howling and barking noises. And so the monks felt troubled and harassed and disturbed and agitated. Maybe the deities even came into the minds of the monks and caused them to become anxious, upset, worried, disconcerted. And so the monks thought to themselves, we can't stay here. It looked like such a beautiful place for solitary meditation, and yet when we come here, there's so many obstacles facing us. And so they decided to go back to the main monastery where the Buddha was living and register their complaint with the Buddha. And so they packed up their things, departed, and came back to the Jeta's Grove Monastery in Shravasti, where the Buddha was living. And then they reported to the Buddha their experience. And they said, Bhante, Venerable Sir, please find another place for us to meditate. We can't meditate peacefully here in that place. And then the Buddha used his special kind of divine vision, looking out over all of northern India to find a suitable place for these monks to meditate. And always his vision would return to the same place, that same little village in the Himalayan foothills where the monks had been meditating. And so the Buddha said to them, so far as I can see, there's only one place in all of northern India where you can succeed in your meditation, and that is the village that you just left. Okay, but now the monks say, but what about this problem? We're being tormented by these tree deities who are chasing us away, trying to get rid of us. And so the Buddha said, I'm going to teach you a method to transform them. And then the Buddha taught them the Metta Sutta and said, you go back there and every morning you congregate and every evening you congregate in a little opening in the woods, and you chant the Metta Sutta. And so the monks went back to their abode outside this village, in this forest outside the village, and every morning, every evening, they would chant the Metta Sutta. And when the deities heard the Metta Sutta, their minds became soft, gentle, loving, and they felt deep love and affection for the monks. And and then they provided all the ideal conditions for the monks to continue their meditation. And so the monks stay there through the rainy season, meditating very happily, without any disturbance. And then they all reached higher levels of attainment in their meditation. So that is the background to the Metta Sutta. And so the Metta Sutta now is considered in Sri Lanka, probably in the other countries of Southeast Asia, we call it a protective discourse, or a discourse on blessings. And so generally probably in all the monasteries in Sri Lanka, it will be part of the regular recitation routine, the suttas that are recited on a daily basis. And it's considered that when you recite the sutta, then you can tame any kind of harmful spirits and sort of win their allegiance, win their affection, so that instead of causing disturbance, they'll protect you. And also it's supposed to be a protection against wild or harmful animals. I'm not sure whether this will work under all circumstances, but I heard a story that there was a German monk who had lived many years in Sri Lanka. He was living a very strict ascetic life, very dedicated meditative life, and he had gone to a cave for his meditation, and he was meditating in the cave, and then one evening, probably shortly after he arrived there, a bear came into the cave. And, normally when you see a bear coming into the cave and you have no place to go, so you would be frightened, and he didn't know, what am I going to do with this bear coming towards me? And so he started to recite the Metta Sutta, and then the bear just stood there listening to the sutta, and then the bear turned around and walked out of the cave and didn't come back. And so he was safe in that cave through chanting the Metta Sutta. I don't know if I would do that if I was sort of there. Okay, so let us look at the sutta itself. And we could divide the sutta into several parts. And I brought in both the Pali text and the English. And maybe what we'll do, I will recite line by line the Pali, and then you can recite after me line by line. And then you get familiar with reciting the sutta. So let's start off just simple recitation. Karaniyam atta kusalena Now you recite. Yang tung santung padung abhisamecha. Okay, so the sutta begins with the word karaniyang, which means what should be done. And this is what should be done atta kusalena, by one who is skilled in the good. That is somebody who has some idea of the purpose or meaning of leading a spiritual life. Or we could say one who is aspiring for the highest goal of the Buddhist spiritual life, the realization of nirvana. And that's indicated by the next line, Yangtang Santang Padang. So Santang Padang means a peaceful state. And that peaceful state is nirvana or nibbana. And abhisamecha means having made the breakthrough. And so this is one who wants to make that breakthrough to attain realization of that peaceful state, that state of liberation, nirvana or nibbana. So that is what should be done. Then we come the next line. Again, you recite after me. Sako uju cha suju cha. Suvacho chasamudu anatimani. Okay, now the sutta is going to enumerate, before it comes to the actual meditation of loving kindness, it's going to enumerate some of the qualities that one should develop as a basis, a foundation, as a foundation or a basis for developing the meditation of loving kindness. And some of the qualities that's going to be mentioned are specific to the monastic life, but with some adaptation, one could also adopt them into the household life. And so first, it says that one should be able or capable in fulfilling one's various duties. Then one should be uju. Uju means straight. And that can be taken to mean honest, straightforward, sincere. And suju is just an intensification of uju, very upright, very honest, completely sincere. Okay, then comes the word suvacho. The word suvacho, it's sometimes mistranslated in some translations of the Metta Sutta by people who don't know the subtleties of Pali. They'll translate this as gentle in speech, but that is not the actual meaning. Suvacho comes from su, which means good or easy, and vacha means speech. But the meaning of suvacho is not a good speaker, but rather one who is easy to speak to, one who is willing to accept suggestions or advice. And this becomes a very, very important quality when leading a meditative life, a spiritual life, under the guidance of a teacher or an association with spiritual friends, since sometimes one might be committing some wrong actions, some faults, improper deeds, and then your teacher or your friends will correct you, will point out some suggestions on how you can change your conduct to come into harmony with the group or to comply with the discipline. And sometimes if somebody has the opposite quality, it's called duvacho. Which means being difficult to speak to. This is a person, when you criticize them, try to correct them, they get angry and argue back and fight back and say, who are you to criticize me? You shouldn't criticize me. I'm right, you're wrong. That's the bad kind of person. So we want to have a soft mind which is amenable to advice. So when somebody gives us some advice, some suggestions, we're willing to accept, at least if we think their advice is valid, we're willing to accept it and correct our behavior in order to improve ourselves. So that's being amenable to advice, suvacho, easy to speak to. And then the next is mudu, which means soft or gentle, to have a soft mind, not a rigid, narrow mind, but a kind of gentle mind. So we always like people who are soft and gentle. Of course, when it comes to vital ethical issues, a person should be strong, determined, and ready to defend themselves. But in normal interactions with people, we like people who are easy to relate to, who are gentle, rather than people who are rough, ferocious, violent. So gentle, and then anatimani means without arrogance, not looking down at others, but being humble. Okay, then the next verse again continues enumerating these virtues. Again, we'll read it together in Pali. Santusakocha subarocha. Then apakichocha sulahukavuti. Yeah, I should explain that in Pali, the letter C is always pronounced like CH in English. So it's a ch rather than s. Okay, so santusako means content. And this is referring especially to the monastic virtue of being content with little, not being demanding, needing a lot of material goods, but leading a very simple life, being content with basically with a simple room or hut in which to live, with enough robes to maintain oneself, with one's daily food, and when you get sick, having medicines. And so not demanding a lot of material goods, but living a simple life of contentment, of satisfaction. And that goes along with subaro, which means easy to maintain, easy to be supported, not making demands on others. And then to undertake, to devote oneself on a long-term basis to the meditation, one should be apakicho, that you have few obligations, few duties. Of course, this is difficult in the worldly life. Often you have to go to your job, perform family duties, but still you should try to at least cut down on some extraneous obligations to have time for your practice. And silahukavuti is to have a light way of living. It's quite similar in meaning to having few duties and having a light way of living. Okay, then next comes, again we recite, Santindriyo cha nipako cha. Appagabo kulesu anugido. Okay, so Santindriyo, this is referring to, Indriya is referring to the sense faculties, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind faculty. So these should be peaceful in the sense that one is exercising some restraint over the sense faculties. Because the senses normally, or at least the mind, goes out through the sense faculties looking for exciting sights, beautiful sounds, nice odors, varieties of delicious food, different tactile sensations, or many flowing thoughts. And so we have to be able to control the sense faculties, to draw in the sense faculties. And that especially means controlling the mind, so that the mind doesn't get sort of lost in its fascination with sense objects. And nipako, here I translate it as judicious. It means being able to make right decisions, sort of having a kind of practical wisdom in everyday life. And then we come to appagabo, which I translate as being courteous. It's the opposite. Pagabo is being like impudent, being domineering, being aggressive in one's behavior. And then the opposite of that, the negation, is being not aggressive, not impudent, but courteous in one's relationships with others. And then the next quality that's mentioned, this is especially pertinent to the monastic life. So it said, kulesu ananugido. So this means not being greedy when amongst families, because monastics live in dependence upon the generosity of others. And so kind of bad conduct on the part of a monk would be, say, going into a house and saying, I want this, I want a new car, please give me a car, give me a new cell phone, give me a new computer. I'm not satisfied with my simple hut, build a little mansion for me. So that would be somebody who is demanding of families. But the ideal is to have few desires, to live a kind of very humble and simple way of life. So not be demanding of families, to not place demands upon families. And then next comes, wow, the Burmese text is corrupt. So this is a sort of just a generalization to encompass everything. So it says that, so first let's read the Pali. Nacha kudang samachare kinchi yena vinyu pare upavadeung. Okay, so this means, it's a very broad general statement, that one shouldn't do anything, even something that seems to be slight or insignificant, because of which wise people might criticize you. So try to avoid any kind of action that might be considered faults or moral transgressions. Okay, so all of these verses that we've covered, all of these lines lay out the basic foundation of virtues, which form the basis for developing the quality of loving kindness. the meditation of loving kindness. Whoops. And then I've just brought in some other virtues from another sutta called the Mangala Sutta. And these can be considered relevant to everybody, whether monastics or lay people. So we have observance of the precepts, then garavo is reverence or respect, humility, then contentment, which we've already covered, then gratitude, being grateful and thankful to those who help us, then khanti is patience, and then suvachasata, which is being willing to accept advice from others. Okay, so now at this point, we have all of the foundation of virtues for developing loving kindness. And now the next lines lay out the themes of meditation. And it seems to me that this meditation on loving kindness that's given in the Mett Sutta is intended for monastics who go into the forest to do the meditation. Because normally when we do the meditation of loving kindness, we focus on human beings, primarily human beings, and then move to other types of beings. But the Mett Sutta is speaking about other types of beings, not really focusing on human beings. But it starts off with a generalization. Okay, we'll recite it together in Pali. Sukhi no va, kami no hantu. Sabbe sata bhavantu sukhitata. So it starts off with the universal radiation of loving kindness. May all beings be happy, that's sukhino, and kamino, may they be safe. And then sukhitata, almost the same as sukhino, so I translate it, may they have happy minds. May they be happy in mind. So that's the broad, universal, general statement. And then we come to the enumeration of different types of living beings. And so we read together, Ye kechi pana bhutati tasava tavarava anavasesa. So again, it starts off with the general statement, whatever living beings there are, but then it divides them into two types. Tasa means those that are weak or feeble, and tavara, those who are firm, steady, or strong. Then unavasesa, without omission, without exception. So there are weak beings, those who are maybe very vulnerable to others, and the strong beings, maybe lions, tigers, elephants. Weak beings, maybe rabbits and deer. Okay, then we have distinctions of different beings. Digava ye mahantava. Majjhima rasakanu katula. Okay, so now we have beings who are long, who have long bodies. Maybe these would be certain kinds of snakes, because if the monk is going out to the forest to meditate, almost inevitably they're going to encounter snakes. So they have long bodies. And those Mahanta are those with huge, large bodies. Big problem in the forests in India, Sri Lanka, India back in ancient times would be elephants, encountering elephants. Majjhima means those with middle-sized bodies. And then Rasika are the short or small beings. And then Anuka mean those with subtle bodies. I don't know, maybe these are spirit beings with bodies that we can't see. So the bodies are very subtle. And then Tula are gross, those with gross bodies. So whether beings are long, large, middle-sized, short, with fine bodies, or gross bodies. Then the next line, Dita va yeva adita. Ye chadure vasanti avidure. So Dita are those who are seen, that is, those who are visible. And then Adita, those who are not seen. We could say those who are invisible. So according to the Buddhist cosmology, there are many, many other realms of existence sort of dwelling in proximity to the earth, but we're not able to see them with our normal vision. But still they interact with human beings. These would be like the earth-dwelling deities, as well as sometimes violent or fierce spirits. And then we have those who are living far away in other countries, other continents, even in the US and other states and cities, and those who are avidure, who are living nearby in our immediate environment. And then the next, Bhuta va sambhavesi va. Sabbe sata bhavantu sukhitata. Okay, so Bhuta means those who have come into existence. So all living beings who are now living in their physical bodies. And then Sambhavesi means those beings who have passed away from one life and they've not yet taken rebirth, but they're in the process of seeking a new existence. There's a kind of intermediate state of beings who are sort of not yet incarnated, so they're in a spirit's kind of astral body seeking a new existence. But for all of them, whether they exist or they're seeking a new existence, sabbe sata bhavantu sukhitata, we have the wish, may all beings be happy in mind. So this ends the actual sort of formal meditation of loving kindness, but we have a few additional verses. And this verse I like very much, the next one. So this is sort of still extending the wish of loving kindness. So we read together, Napuro parang nikubeta Nati manyeta katachi nam kanchi. So now you generate that loving kindness, you formulate the wish may nobody deceive another. Like nobody engage in any kind of dishonest dealings with others. And may nobody look down on others, despise anyone, anywhere. And then next, Vyarosana Patigasanya Nanya Manyasa Dukamicheya. And here you formulate the wish because of anger, that's Vyarosana, or because of thoughts of hatred, Patigasanya, may no one wish suffering for another. So you want all people to dwell together peacefully in harmony with each other. And now the text is going to show the way in which you develop this mind of loving kindness. So this is very, very beautiful verse. Mata yata niyamputang ayusa ekaputam anurake. Here we take all the lines together. Evampi sababhutesu manasang bhavaye aparimanang. So this is sort of describing the peak of loving kindness. So it says that just as a mother would protect her child, her only child, with her own life, so in the same way, towards all living beings, one should develop this mind of loving kindness without any boundaries. So one should look upon all living beings just as if they were your own child. You are the mother, or male, maybe the father, and all of these beings are your own children. And just as the parent has this boundless love for their children, even the only child, so you have this love for all living beings. And then it continues, Metancha sabalokasmin manasang bhavaye aparimanang udang adocha tiriyancha asambadang averam asapatang. So it continues to describe how you develop this mind of loving kindness. So you should develop this metta, goes with manasang, develop this mind of loving kindness towards the whole world, towards all beings throughout the world, aparimanang, without any boundaries, without any limits. And then it mentions the directions. One sends it upwards, downward, and across in all directions without any confinement or limits, and without any feeling of enmity, without any feeling of having adversaries, without any hostility. Then it continues to describe how one should develop it. It says, Titang Churang Nisinova Sayanova Yavatasa Vigatamido Etang Sating Aditeya Brahmam Etang Viharam Idamahu. So this verse is speaking about how you develop this mind of loving kindness in all the postures. Usually we practice it when doing a sitting meditation, but you could also practice the loving kindness in other postures. So especially we can do it as a walking meditation. When doing the walking meditation, it's hard to do like individual people, like my friends, the neutral ones, the hostile people. But when doing the walking meditation, you could do it just in the universal way. May all beings be well and happy. May all beings be well and happy. So you can do it when walking, then when you're standing still, you can be developing it. Then the usual way is to do it as a sitting meditation. But also when you lie down, as you're preparing to go to sleep, if you're practicing the meditation of loving kindness, you lie down and you're thinking, may all beings be well and happy. May all beings be well and happy. But not too intensely. If you do it too intensely, then you're not able to fall asleep. But you do it in a kind of soft and gentle way, and then you go into a very beautiful, peaceful sleep. And then when you wake up, as soon as you wake up, that mind of loving kindness appears again, very soft, gentle, and radiant mind of loving kindness. And then it says that one should resolve on this. It calls this loving kindness sati, which means a mindfulness. So this is a kind of mindfulness. Usually we think of mindfulness as being mindful of breathing, being mindful of the body, but also when you're maintaining this loving kindness, that is a type of mindfulness. And then it says that they call this Brahma Vihara. Brahma in ancient India is the God, the supreme God. And Vihara is a dwelling place. So this is the dwelling place of the supreme deity, Brahma. A little bit like the Christian idea that God is love. So when you develop this universal love, you are dwelling just the way Brahma, the supreme deity, dwells. Okay, the last verse is going to show how one transforms the loving kindness into a vehicle of liberation. Because the mind of loving kindness for Buddhism is not an end in itself, but it can become a platform for developing the insight that leads to liberation. And so now we read this verse together. Ditincha anupagama silava dasanena sampanno kamesu vinayagedam nahi jatu gabaseyang punaretiti. Okay, so now the meaning of these lines is a bit technical, and I'm not going to go into the technicalities of it, but these first two lines are showing the qualities possessed by one at the first stage of enlightenment, which is called the stream enterer, or sotapanna. So a sotapanna, a stream enterer, is one who has given up, who has eradicated the wrong view of a self, of a substantially existing self, and one whose life is governed by the sila, by the precepts. And so they are, in their conduct, they're possessed, their conduct always conforms to the precepts, and so they're virtuous in conduct. And they're dasanena sampanno, they're possessed or endowed with insight. So the stream enterer has gained this insight into the three characteristics: impermanence, suffering, non-self, into the Four Noble Truths. And then, based on their loving kindness, they continue to develop their insight to the point where they eliminate craving for sensual pleasures, or craving for sensual enjoyments. And with that eliminating the craving for sensual enjoyments, they reach the third of the four stages of liberation. Not yet the fourth stage. That's not being described here, but this is the third stage, the stage it's called the stage of the non-returner. And the non-returner does not come back to the human realm of existence, but they're reborn into one of the divine realms, and they attain final liberation there. And so that's why it says, having removed craving for sensual pleasures, one does not come back to birth in the womb. But the non-returner is not yet fully liberated, but they take rebirth in the divine realms, and then from there they attain the final enlightenment and liberation. Okay, so I think this will do for our explanation of the Metta Sutta, and then we'll be taking a little break now, and then we will have the etiquette and the tea ceremony, I think. Okay, so I leave it to the Venerable to...
Hi, Bhante. I think if you want to take some questions, because after this we're going to have the tea ceremony, and it's adjustable.
Okay, so we leave some time for questions. Then.
Yes, we have some questions, then we can go for a break, because the time after this is quite flexible. We have until 4:15, and we will discuss more on the Metta Sutta as well. So if you want, we can have some questions from participants and...
Yeah. Okay, so I see one man there has a question.
Hello. I have a technical question about the language Pali. And in the Buddha time, what language they spoke? And how was the teaching transmitted? How were the teaching transmitted in what language?
I didn't quite...
I mean, the texts that you read were in Pali.
Yeah, it's Pali, yeah.
In the Buddha time, what language did they spoke?
Okay, so you mean, like, what language did the Buddha speak?
Yeah, and how was it got to Pali?
Okay, yeah. This is a rather complex question. So the traditional Theravadan view is that the Buddha spoke Pali, but that's not the view of contemporary scholars. But the Buddha traveled over different regions in northeast India, and probably their languages were very similar, but they were different, like dialectical variations on basic root language. And so the Buddha probably, when he was in the state of Magadha, he would have spoken in Magadhan. In the state of Kosala, he would have spoken in Kosalan. So they would have been similar languages, and Pali is considered to be a syncretic language, which combines features of the Magadhan language with features of a West Indian language. And so it's considered to be a syncretic language. But it would be very similar to the language that the Buddha spoke.
So the texts that we have in Pali
Yeah.
are, I mean, my question, nothing was lost in translation over the generations?
Wait, put the microphone.
Nothing was lost in translation from the onset of Buddhism to, because it was written hundreds of years afterwards.
Yeah. No, this is the way the text was written down and preserved in like the 3rd century BC. Yeah, so this is the version that comes down from the 3rd century BC. So probably the Buddha would have given a version of the Metta Sutta, very, very similar.
I see.
Maybe the dialect is just a little bit different,
I see.
but it's a very similar language.
Okay, thank you.
Bante, my name is Luke. I want to thank you for taking the time to teach us these. My request is a little bit different. I have several of your books, and I would like to know if it's okay to get it autographed by you.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay, if you have them with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Bante.
But we should have the questions based on the sutta, rather.
Based on Sutta.
I think.
Okay. Okay, but that's thing about it. Yeah.
So it's about the last passage, having removed craving from sensual pleasures, one does not come back to the womb.
Yeah.
Now, how do we know that that is what has happened to us? Is it gradual process over the years, or
Is it what?
Like the having removed your cravings? Does that happen over the years, or can it happen quickly, or is that different for different individuals?
Well, there's a gradual process, let's say, of weakening the craving. That's through what you cultivate over a long period of time, the gradual process of weakening. But the process by which one sort of eradicates the craving, that is something that's supposed to happen suddenly. Sort of when one makes a breakthrough of realization, of insight, then different levels of, we call defilements, get eliminated. So at one level, the first level, one eradicates the wrong view of self, doubt, and clinging to rules and observances. Then at the second level, then one weakens sensual craving and ill will, but one doesn't eradicate them at that level. And at the third level, then one eradicates craving for sense pleasures and ill will. But still there are certain other obstacles still remain. But at the fourth stage, then one eradicates those remaining subtle obstacles.
So is that through insight?
Yeah, it's through developing insight to the point where it breaks through into what we call the world-transcending realization.
And is that developed through meditation?
Is that through meditation?
Yes.
Generally, it has to be done through meditation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Comments?
It's a more general question about.
Please put the microphone close.
Yeah. It's a more general question of a metta meditation. So it's compared with probably in the Chan tradition, different breathing, silent illumination, hua tou, or even I guess breathing meditation in Theravada tradition. It sounds like it's somewhat different. The metta meditation is somewhat different than those traditions which you focus on your breathing, focus on hua tou, focus on contemplating something.
Yeah.
And this, how do you compare these two methods? I mean, what's the similarity? What's the differences?
And it is quite different. So the question of, like, what is the difference between the metta meditation and the mindfulness of breathing, or the Watto meditation, silent illumination?
No, the thing is, they should all be very, very, effective meditation method, right? I mean.
Yeah, they're all effective, but the different meditation subjects have different purposes. And so what I would say that the meditation of loving kindness, I think I said this yesterday, is for the purpose of developing the beautiful moral character, or developing the beautiful emotions of the heart. So the things like mindfulness of breathing, or has the purpose of developing strong samadhi or concentration. And then the vipassana or insight meditation has the purpose of developing insight, arriving at insight into the true nature of things. But we have to have, I would say, ideally a balance of these qualities of the mind, like samadhi and wisdom, and the beautiful qualities of the heart, like loving kindness and compassion.
Achieve what you described, right?
If you...
Yeah, the other person was asking about the different level of enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
How achieve it? I mean, I think from your answer, it sounds like we should try to advance in each single area you mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's good to have a balanced practice. Especially, what I found actually, to give account of my own experience, when I was a newly ordained monk in Sri Lanka, sort of my practice was entirely the mindfulness of breathing. And I found my mind getting very dry and brittle and hard just doing mindfulness of breathing. And then I saw the need to find some way to balance that with something else. And then I looked into, I had a copy of the Path of Purification, the English translation of the Visuddhimagga, and in that I found the instructions on the loving kindness meditation. And then I started to add that to my practice, and I found it really softened the mind and gave a very, very nice counterpart or balance to the mindfulness of breathing. And so through the years, I've used both of those.
Back to the first question very quickly. I mean, it sounds like I read somewhere Pali language sounds like it's very formal language. So you do not, it doesn't have a language of you go to a barber, or you eat, how to order lunch in the Pali language. But on the contrary, somebody was saying it's very easy to do everyday things in Sanskrit. And so how do you, I think the key is, I think the other fellow students was kind of asking, where do we get the true speaking of a Buddha, right? I mean, so in that sense, it sounds like Pali is more written language rather than spoken everyday language. Is that true in your opinion, and what's your observations?
I think if you know the names of the different food items, you could go to a restaurant and order food in Pali. Yeah, there are, like, especially in the Vinaya, the discipline mentions it has the Pali names for many different food items. So with that knowledge, you will be able to order or to request many different food items. Yeah, it was used. I mean, it's based on Northeast Indian languages, and so the words would be very, very similar to those that were used in the state of Magadha in the Buddha's time. Yeah, okay, we'll take one more question, then I think we'll have to break, yeah.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yeah.
there it is. If there's a kind of a paradox that's kind of imbued into the sutta here, if we're kind of like the end goal is to try to remove material craving and kind of sensual pleasure, how do we kind of make that copacetic with wishing love and kindness spatio-temporally?
I didn't quite catch.
If kind of the, I guess the ask of the Metta Sutta is to allow for all beings to feel safe, loved,
Yeah.
and imbued with kindness here
Yeah.
and now.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile that with our own, I guess, petition to kind of transcend that idea of sensual safety, material,
They're
that
not-
bind us here and
yeah,
now?
They're not incompatible, since one is wishing with sort of from the heart, one wishes for the well-being, happiness, and safety of all beings. But even that state of boundless love that develops through the practice of metta, for Buddhism, it's not the final goal. So the final goal is to break the bonds that keep us tied to what's called samsara, the cycle of repeated birth and death. And so one develops that mind of loving kindness, and then on that basis, one can proceed to develop insight into the real nature of things. And it's that insight that breaks the bonds and culminates in liberation. Tomorrow I'll go into a sutta that shows the relationship between the development of loving kindness and the development of insight. Okay, I think we should take a break now, and then we'll come for the...
Yeah, please. Thank you. Shall conclude this session. May all please rise. We do half bow to the Buddha. With respect, we pay half bow to Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Bhante. So we shall take a break. Let's be back by in 10 minutes, 20 after 3. Okay, see you then. Yeah. You want to drink the tea?
Yeah, I'll have the tea.
Okay.
The ceremony last week.
Last week? Okay. Did you want to say something? Yeah, it's very nice that that's yeah, I could continue.
Sukino wakemino hontu Sambe santa bhavantu sukhitan